Of the Ten Commandments, which ones were intended from all that is, and which were written by men?
All were interpreted from the perspective of man. Mostly, those 10 commandments were inspired revelation attracted by people in a time who were living a specific life. And what was their life? It was guarded, vulnerable, defensive, worrying about what others were doing. As you listen to the teachers, as you have access to some, you don't have access to much of what they actually said, what was actually even translated in the time, because it has been distorted and changed to fit the vibrations and intentions of all those that have come in between. Those 10 commandments that are so widely revered are spoken from the perspective of what one should not do, which clearly indicates the translator was in a very guarded, vulnerable place as he was receiving it. Thou shalt not kill. We would say, I am appreciator of life. What is another one?
Thou shalt not commit adultery. That's had an enormous effect on everyone's consciousness.
The thou shalt nots are difficult to deal with, aren't they? We would say, what is on the other side of that? In other words, why would someone say, thou shalt not commit adultery? What is it that they are guarding against?
Well, in the present circumstance, people are thinking of bed hopping, of infidelity. My conception...
We are understanding the physical thing that they are talking about, but what we are wanting to get to is, what is it, what is the issue of vulnerability about it? In other words, you heard us say yesterday that all laws, religious or secular, have been created, orchestrated by disconnected beings. And so let's take this law that surrounds marriage or adultery, or the laws about that come forth from people who are not believing in their own ability to be or do or have what they want. And so if they are fortunate enough to find someone who will make a promise to them, then they feel guarded and afraid that that person will not keep the promise forever. So they actually orchestrate laws that say, no matter how bad we are to each other, we will stay together until death do us part. That is a very guarded environment, you see. And we would say that this interpretation of thou shalt not commit adultery, you would have to understand what people were living in that time in order to understand why someone would translate in that way. In other words, wives were looked at as property. They were not looked at as sacred companions so much as you would like to see them today, you see. And so in the same way that you would say, thou wilt not covet thy neighbor's whatever, or thou shalt not take thy neighbor's cow, it was sort of in that context that that sort of information was offered. Esther was feeling very angry and resentful of the medical community. She reached a place where she was vehemently speaking that the medical community is selling illness. If they were not so avid in their offering, there would not be so many sick people. As Esther watches the commercials, listening to them impart the thought that she knows is the beginning of all illness, Esther was feeling great outrage. And then we said to Esther, don't be so hard on the medical community that has risen in response to the vulnerable feeling masses who don't believe in their own ability to be well. In other words, if the masses believed in wellness, the medical community that was coming to their sick aid would not exist. And so in like manner, the masses who are saying, I know not how to lead myself, I feel weak and inadequate and unworthy, and I seek some greater power to tell me what to do, those masses evoke a Moses who brings forth from non-physical the rules to tell them how to live. And then they spend the rest of their generation after generation killing one another as they argue about what he meant, or why he would have said it, or who he was talking to, you see. And so what we are talking about is, and what our powerful wanting, what our reason for existence in the physical realm is about, is to empower each individual, or to connect each individual with his higher knowing. It is what you sense your work is about. As you say, I'm wanting to teach others to meditate so that they may connect with that greater knowing, so that they can be self-guided individuals, so that they can, you see, the physical world, through all of the years of living, generation after generation, keeps saying, won't somebody just tell us what's right and what's wrong? Because I want to be good, but I don't know what action is good. So if somebody will just tell us what's right and what's wrong, then I will do what is right because I want to be good. But the trouble with that is there are too many of you with too many different intentions, and so then you have war after war after war as you argue about whose set of rules are right. We would say none of them are appropriate for any of you.
That's clear enough.
And that what is what comes forth from within in the moment. Let's take it in the simplest of format. Let's say that your house is on fire. And so the firemen come with their trucks and their hoses, and they extinguish the fire, and you say, thank you, this was indeed appropriate action. But if those same men come with their trucks and hoses on a day that there is no fire and spray their water into your house, you would say that is most inappropriate behavior, even though it is the same behavior, just a little different circumstances, you see. And what we're getting at with our very simplistic and obvious example is that there is not a set of rules. The rule, thou shalt not kill, that's really an interesting one, isn't it? How broad does it imply? Does that mean that the lion that eats the rabbit is inappropriate? How far-reaching are these laws? Man says, well, I can identify them. Another man says, well, I can identify them. Has nothing to do with the rabbits or the lions. These laws are man's behavior with man. And then they say it is inappropriate to kill unless you are serving your country. If you are serving your country, then not only is it no longer inappropriate to kill, but it is inappropriate for you not to kill. If you say, I won't go, we'll put you in jail. Patriotism stands higher than this commandment, thou shalt not kill. It is not a wonder that there is great confusion among those who come forth. This generation gap that you experience every time a new person is born comes about because the new one coming in, who isn't living the circumstances and events that in the guarded fashion caused the old rule to erupt, looks at the old rule with new eyes and says, what is this about? Where the old people that remember its evolution say, well, it is important, it has value. Where the new person who isn't experiencing the vibration that caused the law to erupt says, this law is irrelevant. And we say, what we would encourage you to do is to get in sync with the higher law, which is the law of upliftment, the law of allowing, the law of attraction. If you will let your dominant intent be to be the uplifter that you are, you will find yourself never uttering an inappropriate word or never thinking an inappropriate thought. We have watched Esther as she gets closer every day, more consistent in every day, to the vibration of her inner being, who is pure positive energy. And we notice now that when Esther gets on a negative train of thought, her feeling response to it is as severe as if she had taken a gun and shot someone in the head. In other words, to Esther, it is as inappropriate to speak an unkind word or to think an unkind thought as it would be to others to take a life. You're getting the sense of the contrast that we're talking about? When you get into sync with who you really are, you find yourself wanting to be the uplifter that you really are. And all the rules that have come about by people who are guarded and defensive suddenly take on a new light for you. You don't need a rule that says, I will not drive inappropriately, because you would never drive inappropriately. You would be a courteous driver, not just a lawful driver. There are a lot of drivers on your highway that are within the law, but they are rude and aggressive and not in harmony with the kindness that many of you are wanting. They are legal, they are just not appropriate. And so we are saying, don't try so hard to follow the letter of the law. There isn't one. Let the Spirit of goodness be your guide. And you always know where you stand relative to that.